asking for. Now, Corruption Watch is calling for accountability following its findings of alleged mismanagement of funds meant for workers. This week, the watchdog organisation released a report on the Temporary Employee Relief Scheme, which was meant to provide support to those who couldn't work during the hard lockdown when most industries were closed. While the Employment Insurance Fund, or UIF, paid out billions of rands to companies, not all employees received the funds due to them. So what happened to their money? Who stole the relief funds meant for employees to be able to feed their family? Well, to discuss how the UIF is addressing corruption and fraud, we're joined by the fund's acting commissioner, Marsha Bronkhorst. Marsha, good to have you again. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Leanne.
I'm sure this report pleasure. I'm sure the report didn't come as a surprise following the Auditor General's findings and investigations by the Special Investigating Unit into Corruption in TERS. But in this case, now we're focusing on private companies that failed to actually give employees funds that were due to them. What information do you have at your disposal?
Well, Leanne, it's a sad reality that there are indeed companies or employers that have not paid the money over to the workers. And we are busy with those investigations. You'll recall at the previous time I said that we appointed auditing firms, and they are busy working, confirming, verifying whether the workers received the money. And if the employers did not pay the money over to the workers, we will make a case with the police service in terms of fraud and corruption. It's unacceptable. That money was meant for the workers, not for the employers.
Yeah. My concern is surely if Corruption Watch received complaints from workers, they must have approached the UIF as well as the Department of Labour. And this is my concern. I mean, even before this report, there were a number of workers who kept on saying they hadn't received their funds. What complaints have you received?
Yeah, you're correct. We have received the complaints, and it's based on these complaints that we started with these investigations. We've also received complaints from workers, and the majority of the complaints are around two issues. The first of that is that they did not receive the money, that they've not received the money, or that the employer was claiming cash whilst they were working and receiving their salaries. So it's twofold. And that was why the fund decided to appoint the auditing firms to do decent, proper audits of each and every company's payroll to see that the workers indeed got what they were supposed to get, or that the employer did not claim when they were not supposed to claim.
Yeah, and this is very, very worrisome because, you know, you've got people that literally were starving. Is there no way that you can actually trace what happens?
We cannot trace what happens in terms of systematically trace all. I mean, we made nearly 15 million payments. So you can see that it would be impossible for us to go and check and verify each and every payment. That's why we've now started with the auditing process, so that we do it via our auditing process. And we will then trace that indeed whether these payments were made to the workers or not. But we can't do it before we do the payment or immediately after.
We're finding from the report that the sectors that have been most affected, they say private security companies, food and beverage services, fuel sales, i.e. petrol stations, transport and logistics and construction. These were the biggest and most affected sectors by these irregularities. You know, your investigations, and what are they saying as well about these respective sectors, and why specifically them?
I've got no information at the fund yet on which specific sectors, because we have started our audits now and we've targeted all the employers across all sectors. So I think it's too soon for me to confirm that indeed it is in these specific sectors that we find fraud or corruption to be virulent. I think, Leanne, we must also put the Corruption Watch report in perspective. I think there's 126 complaints. On which they based, if I read the report correctly, on which they based the report. So before we say this is rife in an industry, I think we must have a bigger data set to make sure that what we say is indeed the case.
You know, one would, I'd have to argue that, because I mean 126 out of people that are not necessarily too familiar with Corruption Watch, and let's put that in comparison to the amount of people that try and contact you. And I'm not entirely shifting the blame to you. I'm really not trying to do that. But what I am saying is that we've spoken to you on numerous occasions, and when we open phone lines and when we check our Twitter feeds after every single time we interview you, people come here and say you're impossible to get hold of. They cannot get hold of the organization. They've been waiting for payment. They have seen that their employer has been paid, yet they haven't got the money, and you guys are not able to help them. So it is a small portion of people that actually go the route of finding a corruption watch. Not everybody can do that. So I don't believe that we can push that to the side and say it's only a few people. I think it's more than we even believe that are being subjected to this. What have you done in the meantime to address this and make sure that these companies actually account and that the money lands in the hands of the rightful beneficiaries?
Okay. You'll recall that I indicated also in a previous interview that we launched the fraud hotline. And we have received a number of complaints on that hotline in terms of alleged fraud. 20 cases already is with the South African Police Service in terms of following up for possible corrupt activities by the employers. And the others are being investigated to make sure that indeed there was fraud. Sometimes there's a perception and it's not necessarily so. So we've launched the fraud hotline where people can lodge their complaint around fraud or corruption. We have, as I said, started with the auditing. We have also started with the inspectorate of the department, what we call the UI payroll auditors, started auditing companies to ensure that we make sure that people get the money due to them.
Putting aside the companies who did what they were supposed to do at the time, and that was, of course, get the money and then distribute it to their employees, how many other companies have now actually paid their employees?
Okay, we have had 1.155 million employers claiming the TERS benefits. And of those, we are at the moment investigating the 20 and the 120 then, which Corruption Watch has lodged as well. And then the others, we are still busy finalizing the audit. The audit started in January, so I think it's too soon to be able to say this is the definite number of companies that have or have not paid. Of the number of workers that claimed, we've paid just under 13 million workers.
Yeah. Could the companies who paid late be fined in some way?
Yes, we will take action against each and every company that did not do what they were supposed to do, Leanne, because the TERS money was meant for the workers, not for the pockets of the employers.
Okay, so
sorry?
No. That was going to be my next question. I mean, the action taken against them, and perhaps will criminal charges actually be laid by the UIF? So you're going to even go that route against these companies who didn't pay out?
Yes. Oh, yes. If a company claimed money and they did not pay the workers, if a company claimed money and the workers were working and receiving their salaries, we will take action in terms of criminal cases to be opened against these employers.
Following the Auditor General's findings that payments were also made to dead, underaged, incarcerated people and even government officials, you know this, we've spoken about it, whose salaries were not affected by the lockdown, criminal charges were laid. How far is that process of making sure that those people account and the money is actually recovered?
Yeah, the SIU has done substantial work in terms of the investigation of all these types of cases. And at the moment, we're busy working with the South African Police Service to finalize dockets, to finalize cases, and to bring cases to court. I can't give you a number because they've not been finalized in terms of where decisions have been made to institute criminal proceedings. But we're working on those cases as well. There are cases which were legitimate mistakes. There are cases which were legitimate fraud, and we are dealing with all of those. No one who committed fraud against the UIF will be allowed to escape the law.
Good. I mean, I think a lot of people would like to hear this, but we need to see this in practice. I mean, let's say, how can the workers who have played a role in ensuring companies who have done this are caught be protected? Also, is there a strong possibility of the employee losing their job or actually being suspended?
Well, no employee should lose his or her job or be suspended if they bring a unscrupulous employer to light. And that is why the fraud hotline is anonymous. They only give the name of the employer and we'll take the matter from there. We do not want people to get into trouble. And employees must please use the fraud hotline. They can go to an office of the Department of Labour and say that there is this alleged fraud, so that we can look at the matter and investigate and see indeed whether it is true.
Yeah. All right. Just finally, I mean, are there examples of any companies whose employees reported them, but the company itself did not in fact receive the TERS funds? What happens to them in this instance?
I've not received any complaints such as that, Leanne. Most of the complaints is that the money was paid over and not paid over to the workers.
All right. Well, that's, thanks for talking to us there, Marsha, just giving us the perspective from the UIF, Acting UIF Commissioner Marsha Bronkhorst. This Corruption Watch report talking about the alleged misappropriation of the TERS fund. And it wasn't a rosy one at all, where private companies need to be held accountable for actually being paid out the money and then not giving it to their employees. Big issue, very big issue. All right. Question.